Brian, what's on your radar?
So heading into the final stretch of the 2006 midterms, House Democrats were in need of an agenda. They had ridden anger at President George W. Bush as far as they could, and his mishandling of the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina and the occupation of Iraq had allowed them to skate by without offering a compelling counter-message. They could have told the American public they were running to end the disastrous war in Iraq, but Rahm Emanuel, chair of the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee, had recruited a ton of war-supporting conservative Democrats to try to flip conservative Republican seats. He warned that anything remotely progressive would be out of step with those swing district candidates, yet he still recognized Democrats had to run on something. Finally, in late July of that year, Pelosi and Emanuel finally released their vision, which they called 6 for 06. It was filled with incremental, vague, small ball stuff. But one of the most specific and popular elements of the 6 for 06 was a promise that Democrats would allow Medicare to negotiate lower drug prices with pharmaceutical companies and use the savings to expand Medicare benefits. In November 2006, they won the House back for the first time since 1994. And yes, right out of the gate, they passed a bill to do just that, before it promptly died in the Senate. The restriction on Medicare negotiating drug prices dates back to the creation of Medicare Part D in 2003. It's a Republican plan that Bush White House advisor Karl Rove believed would make seniors a permanent block of Republican voters. The legislation, opposed by Democrats at the time, added prescription drugs as a benefit of Medicare, a major advance that has been important to improving the health of seniors, both personal and financial. The law was also a major gift to pharmaceutical companies and included a provision that would bar the Health and Human Services Department from negotiating lower prices. Once a law like that is in place, well-funded networks congeal around it to keep it in place. And I took a look at that lobbying operation in a new piece in The Intercept with my colleagues Lee Fang and Sarah Sirota. Big Pharma's lobby shop is called the Pharmaceutical Research and Manufacturers of America, and it spends over $500 million a year shaping policy and mobilizing the pharmaceutical industry to speak with one voice when it comes to any attempt to regulate drug prices. So Obama, during the 2008 race, pointedly banned drug industry lobbyists from donating to his campaign and villainized them on the stump. But even at this seemingly high watermark for reform, at every step of the way, the drug industry money continued to flow into the Democratic Party with the explicit goal of buying influence and curbing any prospect for price-cutting policy becoming law. He said at one rally, "First, we'll take on the drug and insurance companies and hold them accountable for the prices they charge and the harm they cause. And then we'll tell the pharmaceutical companies, thanks but no thanks for overpriced drugs. Drugs that cost twice as much here as they do in Europe and Canada and Mexico. We'll let Medicare negotiate for lower prices." Yet despite the ostensible ban on lobbyists, non-registered drug industry representatives poured cash into the Obama campaign through individual contributions. And Pfizer officials paid $1 million for skybox seats to watch Obama accept the Democratic nomination in Denver at a party convention made possible by donations from AstraZeneca, Eli Lilly, Amgen, and Merck. The chief executives of the largest drug makers mingled with DNC officials at invitational events. The Center for American Progress Action Fund, the think tank that was considered Obama's administration in waiting, accepted $265,000 from pharma during the campaign. The next year, during the legislative battle to pass what became the Affordable Care Act, pharma lobbyists cut a deal with the White House.
That over the weekend, we reached an understanding that will help close the notorious donut hole in Medicare Part D. This is a significant breakthrough on the road to health care reform, one that will make the difference in the lives of many older Americans.
What Obama didn't mention there, and which I later reported, is that in exchange for the drug industry agreeing to lower costs for some seniors on the way to closing a coverage gap called the donut hole, the White House would make sure that Obamacare didn't allow Medicare to negotiate with drug companies for lower prices and didn't allow cheaper drugs imported from Canada. So next, the Supreme Court's Citizens United decision in 2010 radically reshaped the political landscape for pharmaceutical companies. Drug firms were already routinely ranked among the largest industry donors to candidates and PACs. Pharmaceutical companies and their representatives donated regularly to lawmaker foundations, including the foundation run by former Senator Orrin Hatch and by current Majority Whip Jim Clyburn, as well as the Congressional Black Caucus, the Congressional Hispanic Caucus Institute, and other nonprofits and think tanks associated with policymakers. But the court decision opened a new spigot for drug firms to dominate elections. Pharma went from routine $1,000 checks to individual lawmakers to dumping seven-figure sums of largely undisclosed corporate cash into the coffers of dark money groups and super PACs. In short order, pharmaceutical firms made sure that any close congressional election would rely heavily on funds tied at least implicitly to a demand that drug price regulations stay off the table. The Democrats lost the House in 2010, while Republicans swept state houses across the country and used their newfound power to gerrymander a durable majority. Even as Democrats won the popular vote for the House over the next decade, they remained locked out of power. The Obama administration, hobbled by its previous losses, did little to fight the pharmaceutical industry on any major cost-related issues. But the salience of the problem began to make waves again in 2015 and 2016 as controversies around astronomical drug price increases absorbed headlines. Touring Pharmaceuticals, led by a young investor named Martin Cicrelli, purchased the patent rights to a crucial parasitic infection pill called Daraprim, and he hiked the price by 5,000% overnight.
You could use that attention to come clean, to right your wrongs, and to become one of the most effective patient advocates in the country, and one that can make a big difference in so many people's lives. I know you're smiling, but I'm very serious, sir. The way I see it, you can go down in history as the poster boy for greedy drug company executives, or you can change the system. Yeah, you.
And Joe Manchin's daughter, Heather Bresch, was hauled before Congress for hiking the price of EpiPens by 600%. States attempted to push back but were crushed by the tidal wave of pharmaceutical money. In 2016, a California ballot measure attempted to tie the price of Medicaid drugs to the rates paid by the Department of Veterans Affairs, a workaround to lower prescription via collective bargaining. The drug industry plowed into the state, financing the most expensive ballot campaign in history at that point to pressure voters into opposing the law. Groups typically aligned with Democrats, such as the NAACP, San Francisco's historic LGBT Democratic clubs, and longtime Latino civil rights organizations, accepted consulting fees and grants from drug companies that year and endorsed the drug industry-backed campaign to defeat the ballot measure. Drug industry-backed ads featured an array of Democratic organizations they had funded as they persuaded voters to oppose the measure, which went down in defeat. That same year, frustration at the healthcare system helped Bernie Sanders nearly topple Hillary Clinton in the Democratic primary, and it vaulted the idea of Medicare for all into mainstream conversation. The next midterm, in 2018, the DCCC spied another opportunity to regain the House, but they warned candidates not to run on Medicare for all or any other big sweeping reform, urging them instead to focus on, yep, you guessed it, lowering drug prices. In a memo to candidates, the DCCC said that the top testing recommendation in their polling and focus groups was to push those prices lower by allowing the government to negotiate lower drug prices. Democrats that cycle and in 2020 made lowering drug prices their central campaign issue in television ads. One of the Democrats who flipped a Senate seat in 2018 promising lower drug prices was Kyrsten Sinema.
Growing up, our family struggled to make ends meet, and we didn't have health insurance. No child should go without a doctor, and no family should be bankrupted by medical bills. We need to make healthcare more affordable, with access to the lowest cost prescriptions, and fix what's broken in the system, not go back to when Arizonans had no say about their health coverage. I'm Kyrsten Sinema. I sponsor this message because every American deserves quality, affordable healthcare.
The 2020 elections put Democrats in the strongest position in a decade and a half to finally enact their policy agenda. While holding slight majorities in the House and Senate, they could pass long-promised drug pricing reform using the budget reconciliation process that allows them to avoid a filibuster from Republicans. During the 2020 election, Pharma gave another $26.4 million to the Congressional Leadership Fund, the super PAC associated with House Republican leadership. Pharma also financed groups for Democrats, including the major super PACs tied to party leadership and Center Forward, a dark money group that supports moderate Democrats. Throughout the reconciliation negotiations, Pharma has continued to shower money and run ads for House and Senate Democrats holding up reform. They even pumped money into the Lupus Foundation and used it to thank lawmakers for not getting behind the legislation. A couple weeks ago, Bernie Sanders asked how the party could ask people to vote for it with a straight face if they couldn't get this one thing done that they've promised over and over and over. In a scrum with reporters, he challenged them to actually report on it.
And again, I'm going to say this and you're not going to write it, and that worries me. We got 1,500 paid lobbyists here from Pharma. 1,500. They are spending hundreds of millions of dollars trying to make sure that they continue to make outrageous profits and charge us by far the highest prices in the world for prescription drugs. So this is not just an issue of the pharmaceutical industry. This is an issue of American democracy and whether or not the United States Congress has the ability to stand up to incredibly powerful special interests like the pharmaceutical industry. Does that interest anybody here?
Yes.
Yeah. Is that an issue?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. I would hope you give some thought about it, guys, because this is, lowering the cost of prescription drugs, very popular. Obviously, it's what the American people want. But we are at a moment when you have over 80% of the American people in poll after poll after poll, they say lower the cost, have Medicare negotiated. The VA has been doing this for I don't know how many years, but for many, many years. The VA is paying 1/2 of what Medicare pays for prescription drugs. Makes sense to anybody in America? It doesn't. Why aren't we not succeeding? Because you have an incredibly powerful special interest who is incredibly greedy. And this is an issue not just of lowering prescription drugs, it's whether or not democracy can work. And if democracy cannot work, if we cannot take on the pharmaceutical industry, why do you go on and ask people to vote? Why do you ask them to participate in the political process? We don't have the power to take on a powerful special interest. So that's why this, to me, is so very important.
What is your order? Is it just the lobbying that's stopping the free?
No, it's campaign contributions. It is TV advertising. It is, my guess is that as of now, I'm guessing, it's that the pharmaceutical industry has probably spent $500 million trying to defeat this.
And that might even be an underestimate. And now, Big Pharma is on the brink of victory. So not bad for $500 million.
Yeah, I mean, I can't even look. I think I'm not sure why if the government isn't going to control this process anyway. This is not like some kind of free market process. This is a government explicitly regulated. The government's involved in every aspect of this.
Right.
So why you wouldn't allow that negotiation to lower prices doesn't actually make sense to me.
Right. The only way it makes sense is that they control the government rather than the other way around.
It seems like it's a good thing for a specific industry, for specific firms, but not a good not principle. There's no principle behind it because the government's involved anyway.
Right.
And it's a good for a specific firm, but not good for consumers or the as a whole. The paying for buying. People need to buy these drugs, and they're more expensive here than anywhere else.
And it's a great thing for former senators and former members of Congress and former staffers because they have a ready employer, right there in Washington, spending $500 million a year, making sure that the status quo stays the status quo.
Yeah, not good.
No, indeed. Looking forward to what's on your radar next. Hopefully better news.
I'll try.